Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Beyond English Fluency live masterclass. How is everyone today? Hope you are enjoying your Thursday or maybe your Friday, depending on where you are. In this session, I'm going to be sharing about improving and building vocabulary confidence for your international career. So I have a few different strategies that I'm going to be sharing, as well as vocabulary, and we're going to look at some very specific examples for today's masterclass. So if you're just joining now, let me know where you're joining from. I'm in Mexico City. Let me know where you are right now. And it's wonderful to have you join. I see a few people are joining from YouTube and LinkedIn, so welcome. Hey everyone, good to have you here. Let us know where you're joining from and where you are. Yes, it looks great to have you here. Haseen, welcome. Good to see you here. Where are you right now? Where is your location? Okay, perfect. So like I said, I'm going to be sharing some different strategies to help you when it comes to building your vocabulary confidence. Over the last few days, I have actually offered a free challenge. I see many faces, many names here with me right now that have been part of that vocabulary challenge that I've offered. And there's a few insights that I wanted to share with you when it comes to developing your English and developing your vocabulary. So I'll be sharing lots of different examples with you. If you've just joined, let me know where you're joining from. So Haseen is joined from Pakistan. Welcome. Jael, hello from Uruguay. Very nice to have you here. Ana Clara is joined from Brazil. Welcome. So good to have you here. So this is a masterclass, and I'm going to be sharing how you can develop your vocabulary. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Gemma Keeling, and I typically help design and tech professionals to develop their speaking fluency and their confidence in using the language in their job. Now, one thing is, many of the professionals that I work with and that I speak to, they typically have a level of English where maybe you have a good understanding. Hopefully you can understand me okay. And typically, if I said you have an opportunity tomorrow to work in English, you would say, okay, probably you could survive in that position. But those of you that are using English at work and you're surviving in your job, it can be very frustrating. It can be really challenging. Honestly, it can be a nightmare. That was what someone in my community said recently. It's a nightmare. It really, to have to explain themselves, to be able to explain things the same way that they can in their first language, whether that is Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, Urdu, whatever language you speak, it's a challenge, it's frustrating. And most of the time, you understand the language. You might read lots of articles and listen to videos on YouTube, and you understand. And maybe you can communicate and speak with friends. But in a professional situation, in a situation where your career is on the line, you want to be able to articulate yourself and feel really confident when doing that. And maybe you're working in a team and you have people in your team from many different countries. And sometimes the language that you're using in a professional environment can be very complex. Even in your first language, there's many concepts which can be fluffy concepts. They don't really make sense. Or maybe it means one thing to me and a different thing to another person, and you don't really have the alignment. And there's very abstract ideas. And you might struggle with that because maybe you don't understand 100% of what your colleagues are saying or what is expected of you. And that can be really challenging with those small details. So what is it that you can do? One thing is developing and understanding those differences and those nuances when it comes to vocabulary and understanding the contextual use of the language. That is very key when you're communicating in an international environment. So I have a question for everyone. Who here is using English right now in their job or maybe in a project? Let me know just with a quick yes. Yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Or maybe just a little bit. Let me know. Are you using English right now in your job? Are you using it as part of your career or not? Let me know. Okay. So as I said, we're going to be looking at how you can develop your vocabulary, why that's so important. And then we'll also explore, once you have the vocabulary, once you know what to say, once you have a good foundation of the language, the next thing is knowing how to confidently say it and use that language. Maybe you have a good level of English, you have a good level of understanding, but you don't feel, maybe you understand everything, you know the language, but when it comes to using it, you will find maybe an alternative way of saying something. Maybe you stick to what you feel confident using, and that's very normal. So the next step is to develop and refine that fluency, because maybe you have one way to say an idea or to express yourself, but there is a more accurate way. Or maybe you try to explain something and it takes you a lot longer. That can be really frustrating for you and maybe for your colleagues too. And I'm sure, they're very patient, but still there's more urgency when it comes to a professional environment of what is it that you're trying to explain and having that understanding between each other. So you want to also develop your fluency. Now, what does fluency really mean? Fluency has many different aspects. It can also be how confident you are in using the language. If I say to you, do you consider yourself fluent? I'm curious what you say. What do you think? What is fluency? So fluency has many different aspects, but really you want to be able to refine and be able to express yourself with all the different tools that you have in your language. Now, in a professional environment, you want to be able to do that in a way where you sound more confident in what you're saying and just generally more professional. The next step is, once you know the what to say, you know how to express yourself, you then, if you're working in an international environment, you want to then be able to develop and navigate the very specific situations that happen in your career, the daily tasks, what you're doing every day, maybe in your first language, how it doesn't always directly translate. And we'll be looking at that a little bit today. Okay, so a few people have said, no, you're not using English. Ana Clara said, yes, you're using English. Haseen said, no. Okay, I'm a student. Yeah, so to convey your idea clearly, yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking here, but that's right. So you want to be able to explain yourself. You want, if you have an idea, maybe in your job, or okay, you said you're a student, you want to be able to explain the meaning. You want to be understood. Hopefully, that's what your question is. Let me know if you have a question. So as we go through, if you do have any questions, just let me know. Feel free to ask any questions about this topic. I'm happy to help. Okay, so one thing I want to share with you was some of the takeaways over the last few days, working with, we had over 100 design and tech professionals this week that took part in the 5-day sprint to fluent vocabulary. And I want to share some of the key takeaways from that. Really important points when it comes to developing your language. Whether you consider yourself fluent, maybe even a native speaker, we had some in the community that joined that had a very high level, even a native level. And you might think, well, why did they join? And you might see in just a moment as we go through. And also those who maybe are not using English at all in their job, really they have a lower level, maybe an intermediate level, and still there's many takeaways that I wanted to share, no matter what level you have in your English and your fluency. Now, the first thing is that true mastery of a language, it goes beyond passive acquisition. So what do I mean? I mean that it's about active engagement. Now, for many of you, if you hear another language and you're not familiar with that, if you're reading it or you're listening to it, you can start to decode. And it's the same with English. You probably watch many movies, TV series, you read books, articles, magazines. You're always consuming English, or maybe not as much as you want to, but maybe you are. And you're listening to songs and you're listening to the language. And many people will come to me and say, I'm not making the progress I want to. And I ask them, well, are you doing anything to try to improve your language? And they say, yes, I'm listening to music, I'm reading articles maybe about design on Medium, I'm reading, but I'm not really speaking. And that's the key issue, is I'm not using the language. Now, not to say that that's not helpful, but it's not enough to just consume English, to listen or to read the language. And I know I made the same mistake with Spanish as well, not actively using it. And this is not going to also build your confidence in actively using it, especially in a professional situation. Now, if you're listening, if you're reading, you will improve your understanding. You will improve your comprehension, of course, but you're not going to build your confidence in using the language. And if you don't have the confidence in using the language, it's going to be very challenging to have an interview in English, let alone to then start saying yes to opportunities in an international environment. So that's the first thing, is just how important it is to really actively engage in the language. So the next takeaway that I want to share with you is, when you learn new vocabulary, you want to also focus on using it, hearing it in the specific context. And then once you hear it, you can then create the connections. So if you learn a new phrase, you want to then connect it to something you already know, or maybe connect it to something in your first language, or connect it to a situation where you can use that phrase or verb or that word. So language learning in practical application, when you do that, when you learn in specific situations, it can help you to develop your confidence in your ability to communicate effectively. So those are some of the key points that we had. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So someone said, I can understand prose instead of poetry. What is the reason? Well, poetry, the main reason with that is when it comes to poetry, it's usually quite creative. The language that they use in poetry is not very standard. It's not standard English that you are maybe used to reading or watching or listening to. So that's one of the reasons. It can also be the vocabulary that they use in poetry. There's a few different reasons, but hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so what do I mean then by learning language in the context? It's the specific situation. And one thing is, you might understand or might be able to say, to your colleagues, and you greet your friends, but how can you, for example, talk about your background and what you did at the weekend, maybe more in a situation that's appropriate, in a situation where you might have to not just, you think about the appropriateness of the situation, whether it's formal or informal. So for example, a phrase that is perfectly acceptable in a casual conversation may be inappropriate in a business situation or a business meeting. And when you're aware of what language is appropriate, you can then tailor your language to that situation. And then you can avoid any misunderstandings. And it helps because you then feel, okay, I can't use this phrase, or if I use this phrase in this situation, maybe it would be understood in a different way. And when you know that, you can feel more confident in using the language. Okay, so I'm going to share some specific examples today. And what I'm sharing with you today are the exact strategies and language and techniques that have proven effective for many of my own clients, for other professionals like you. They're not just theory, they have been tested and used in real world application where my clients have not been so confident using English, and then they follow these strategies, and then they're able to maybe move to a new country or to start working on a new project, and then confidently use the language and speak up at work, for example. Maybe you are using English, but you're not speaking up as much as you would like, or sharing what you know, or defending your decisions, because maybe you feel not as confident as you like in the language. Okay, so for vocabulary mastery, one specific situation that many of you may find yourself in is you might have to share important information. That could be to your colleagues. It might be that you're speaking to clients or to other stakeholders. When you want to share important information, whether that is updates on a project, changes in your schedule, or maybe critical decisions, you want to do that very clearly to make sure everyone understands. And a phrase that you can use if you have something important you want to share is just a heads up. I'm going to share it here. Just a heads up. Just a heads up. Okay, this one. Just a heads up. And when you say just a heads up, it's used to tell someone, to inform someone about something important or relevant that they may need to know. So it's typically used in an informal situation, or it can be when you're communicating with your colleagues or your friends. And it's suitable for situations when you want to give someone a friendly warning or a notification. And the notification could be about a potential issue, a change, or an upcoming event. If it's something very important and very urgent, you wouldn't use just a heads up. You would say, this is very important, and you would share what it is. I have some very important news to share with you. But if you want to share some information, I might say, for example, hey, just a heads up, the deadline for the project has been moved to Friday. So here's an example. Hey, just a heads up, the deadline for the project has been moved to Friday. It is important that they know the deadline has been moved, but it's not urgent. So we would be able to say, just a heads up. Just a heads up, next week, I will be on vacation. I'm sharing information. Okay, let's see if you can use this. If you want to practice and you want me to give you feedback, feel free to do so. So that's one, if I want to share. Now, this is used in a very specific situation. The situation at work could be if there's been some changes in your schedule, or there's an update on a project, or if you made a critical decision and you want to communicate that so everyone is aware that the project deadline has moved. You can say, just a heads up. Okay, now another situation. So we're going to look at very specific situations. Like I said, when you do that, when you look at language in a very specific context, one, you can feel more confident using it. And two, you can be more accurate and confident knowing what I'm saying is the right thing to say. Okay, another situation you might find yourself in your international career is managing people's expectations. So when you are setting realistic expectations, you want to do that quickly, you want to do it promptly to prevent any misunderstandings, also to reduce any stress and to promote a more positive environment. So one thing is, I'm very busy right now and I'm managing your expectation that maybe I can't finish this right now. But instead of saying, I'm very busy right now, you can say, I'm tied up at the moment. I'm tied up at the moment. I'm tied up at the moment. Now, this is used when you want to share that I'm currently busy or occupied with a task, and I'm unable to attend to something immediately. Now, it can be a little bit more polite to say this than I'm busy right now and not giving an explanation. I'm busy right now. You can say, I'm tied up at the moment. It's a polite way to decline a request or to express that you're available right now for immediate assistance. So, for example, I could say to my colleague, thank you for reaching out, but I'm tied up at the moment with a deadline. Can we discuss this later today? Or can we discuss this tomorrow, for example? Okay, so we're looking, if you've just joined, welcome. We're looking at language in specific scenarios, specific situations. So one is if you need to manage the expectations of your colleagues or your clients. And you might say, instead of saying, I'm busy, you can say, I'm tied up at the moment. I'm tied up at the moment. Okay. I like this one. Haseen said, oh, I am not tied up at the moment, but I'm excited to listen to you carefully. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, wonderful. So, for example, thank you for reaching out, but I'm tied up at the moment. Can we discuss this later today? And it's suitable in a professional situation when you don't want to sound so rude or dismissive. It's commonly, you can use it in email communication, in a phone call, or face-to-face communication as well. Okay, now another aspect, another situation. So we've looked at the first situation. We looked at if you need to share important information that is not necessarily urgent. And if you want to do that, you can say just a heads up. We also looked at another situation when you're managing expectations. If you're very busy, you can say I'm tied up at the moment. Okay, and then the next one, I have another situation, and that could be if you are in a meeting at work and you want to postpone a decision. So you're not ready to make the decision. You want to press the pause button on the decision. And decisions may be postponed, they may be paused when there's not enough information or it's incomplete. And maybe there's not enough information to make an informed choice. And this could happen if maybe you need to collect more data, you need to carry out more user research, or maybe there needs to be more analysis before making a decision. I would like to know, let me know, for those that are listening, if you're watching the replay, you can also write your answer. Have you had to pause to postpone a decision recently, and why? So that's my question for everyone. Have you had to postpone a decision recently, and why? Let me know. Okay. Now, when you have to pause a decision and you're in a meeting, there is a phrase that I want to share with you that you can use. And the phrase is to circle back to. To circle back to. Now, to circle back to means to revisit or follow up on an issue or a topic at a later time. So to circle back to, I'm going to come back to this. You can say to circle back to. Let me just have the meaning. Okay, there we go. To circle back to, and it means to revisit or to follow up on a topic or issue at a later time. And if there is a decision where you don't have enough information, you can't make it just at that moment, but it is important, you want to circle back to it. And for example, I might say, I appreciate your quick response. I need to gather additional information and I will circle back to you at the end of the week. So it's saying, another way is saying I will come back to you. I will let you know. To circle back to. And if you want to suggest postponing or pausing a discussion or maybe a decision for a later time, you can say to circle back to. Okay, wonderful. Anyone have any questions with this? So we've looked at 3 different specific scenarios where you can think about the specific vocabulary in that situation. If you need to postpone a decision, you can say to circle back to. Or if you want to manage the expectations of your colleagues and you say, I'm very busy right now, you can say, I'm tied up at the moment. Okay, another situation might be you have something important to share, but it's not very urgent. You can say, maybe you're in a meeting and you want to share something maybe at the end of the meeting, just a heads up. Like I said, just a heads up, I'm going to be taking a vacation on Friday, for example. Okay, let's see. We have some comments. So Eduardo said not to postpone, but to wait for something else to be completed in order to start a task. It happens on a feature we are coding at the moment. Yeah, perfect example. So it's not to completely postpone it. We are going to circle back. If I say we will postpone it, maybe, depending on where you're from, postponing means maybe we're just never going to do it. We're going to postpone it. Maybe it's never going to happen. But if you say to circle back, it has more of an intention that we are going to do this. We just maybe need to do a few things. And like you said, a few tasks need to be completed before we can do that. Yeah, I love that happened to you recently. Thank you for sharing, Eduardo. Okay. This one is difficult to use in a sentence. That's to circle back to. I think you mean to circle back to. Okay, well, feel free to write a sentence and maybe I can share some more sentences. But I can say it, for example, I'm at the moment, let's think about Eduardo's example. At the moment, we won't be able to code for the feature, but let's circle back on Monday once we have more data, for example. So we might say, let us circle back. Let's circle back. We will come back to this. We will circle back to this on, and then usually the date, on, let's say, on Tuesday. We will circle back to this on Tuesday. Hopefully that helps with a few more examples. But yeah, perfect. So we've looked at 3 different specific situations of using the vocabulary. Any questions about this as we go through? Okay, so the next thing is, once you know what to say and to use that language in specific situations, another aspect is our cultural understanding of the language and how language might be understood. So, for example, depending on where you're from, and we have people from many different countries listening, I know many of you that have said you're coming, maybe you're not able to listen live and you're watching the replay. I think we have people from many different countries all over the world. And depending on where you're from is how language is understood, not just in English, and maybe not just in English and another language, but even within the same language-speaking countries. So for example, within English-speaking countries, even within the UK or within England, it might be understood differently based on your communication style or your preference. And also the difference when working One thing is, British English and American English. We have many similarities in that we value politeness in the way that we communicate. However, those from the US typically, not always, but typically value more direct communication compared to those in the UK. We aren't as direct. There's more subtle undertones of what someone is saying. So what we're saying isn't always exactly what we mean, which makes things very challenging. But we're going to look at some specific words and phrases for that, of what someone says and what it means. Okay, I see we have a comment. So Edwala said, cool, thank you. Is this the correct form? We will circle back to this. 100%. Yeah, perfect. You can say, we will circle back to this. Yeah, very nice. We will circle back to this. You can say, we will circle back to this. Let's circle back to this. Or I'm going to circle back to this. Either is fine. Perfect. Okay, so when it comes to understanding language, one thing is the understanding of politeness and how that can be understood differently in different countries and expectations. And what might be considered polite language in one culture and one country can be perceived differently and even negatively in another. And when you can understand this, the language that you're using and how it's understood, you will then be able to have more successful cross-cultural interactions. And today we're talking about using English and feeling confident with your language in an international environment. So I'm going to share an example with you. And one is when we're asking a request, asking someone to do something. Now, all of you have probably heard this expression is, would you mind? Would you mind? Now, do you think asking would you mind is formal? Is it direct? Is it polite? What do you think? Let me know. Is it polite? Do you think it's polite, direct, formal, informal, indirect? What do you think? Is it rude? What do you think with this expression? Would you mind? Would you mind? Would you mind? Okay, let's see. Okay, Susanna said it's polite and formal. Okay, yeah, you're correct. You're not wrong. But let's see what others think. I think it's very formal. Okay, very formal. Haseen said formal and polite. Okay, yeah, formal and polite. Eduardo thinks very formal. So no one thinks that it's informal. No. Okay, that's fine. We'll have a look at it. So you're right. It is typically perceived as a polite expression, a way to make a request. But it can also be used in a way that is not very formal and also is indirect. We can be quite direct as well by using this expression. I'm going to give you an example so you believe me. But for example, one use I might say, it says someone has their music playing and it's very noisy and I don't want to listen to the music while I'm working. What do you think? Do you like to listen to music while you're working? Yeah or no? Do you like to listen to the music? Now, maybe you don't like listening to the music, so you can say, would you mind turning down the volume a bit? Would you mind turning down the volume a bit? I'm trying to concentrate. Now, in this, because you're saying, I'm trying to concentrate, it would be direct, but polite. It is a polite way of asking, turn down the music. That would be very direct. Would you mind turning down the volume a bit? I'm trying to concentrate. No, maybe it's not so direct, I would say. This is commonly used in places like the UK, where we don't want to be so direct. We would say, would you mind turning down the volume? I'm trying to concentrate. However, like we said, it can be very formal. I think Eduardo said, yeah, I think it's very formal. And you're right, there can be times where we use this in formal situations. For example, would you mind sending me the report by the end of the day? Formal way of asking. What would you say is a more informal way? Would you mind sending me the report by the end of the day? Let's see. Okay. Now, I also said it can be used in an informal way. You're thinking, are you sure? Really? It can be formal and informal? For example, I might say, would you mind grabbing me a coffee on your way back home? And this is very informal. I would not, and it's because the request I'm making is not something I would ask, for example, my manager. I might ask a family member or a close friend, would you mind grabbing me a coffee on your way home? And in the UK, this is an informal expression. Would you mind grabbing me a coffee on your way home? It's a request. Because you're using the expression, would you mind? Sure, it's a little bit more polite, but it's overall informal. This is not what I would ask my manager, for example. Would you mind grabbing me a coffee on the way home? Okay, so let's see. Haseen has a good example sentence. Would you mind to tell us? So just a correction, it would be, would you mind telling us about yourself, especially your profession? Great example. Yeah, would you mind telling us about yourself? Yeah, just a quick correction. So not to tell, would you mind telling us? Would you mind telling us about yourself, about especially your profession? Yeah, perfect. Good example sentence. And yeah, for those of you that don't know, I'm happy to tell you about my profession. So I help professionals to develop their English vocabulary, their speaking, and their confidence to use English in their jobs. That's okay, no problem for the correction. Okay, so as you can see, just from this expression, would you mind, which many of you have said, yes, it's polite, it's formal and polite, it's very formal. Even though it's formal, we can use that same expression in an informal situation. And that's the same with a lot of vocabulary, a lot of language. And it's about understanding the language in these very specific situations. Okay, so to recap, we've looked at some ways that you can enhance your language in very specific situations. And when you do that, you feel more confident using that language in that environment. We've also looked at how when you understand the differences in politeness, in cultural understanding, it can help you to express yourself and also understand what the speaker is saying. What is the true message behind what they're saying? And also what might be considered polite or inappropriate or appropriate in one culture could be disrespectful or rude in another, even if it's the exact same expression. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. We've been going for a while. Thank you for everyone that have stayed. I've had some really good questions from you all. But I wanted to share that if you've enjoyed this, if you like learning from me and you would like to continue to develop your vocabulary to feel confident in your English, please send me a message. I am offering a group program to help my community of design and tech professionals to improve their confidence and their vocabulary so they can not just survive at work, but thrive Send me a message. I love hearing from you. Send me a message and I can share more about how we can work together to see if it's a good fit for you. Okay, we have a question. So Susanna said, could you is less polite than would you? Okay, typically could you is a little less indirect. It's a little less polite, you're correct, than would you. But like I said, you could, there's also other factors. So if you say, could you please turn off the light, or would you mind turning off the light? Both of those are polite in how you're saying them. But yes, you are correct. Could you is a little bit less polite than would you mind? Would you mind? Also, can you is also considered a little bit less polite. But for example, if you use can you please, if you ask with or thank, can you please, or the tone of your voice, you can still sound very polite, even by saying, can you, could you, would you mind, are all can be very polite. But yeah, you're right, Susanna. Okay, nice. Okay, no, you're welcome. Perfect, wonderful. Yeah, no, I'm happy to help with this. So to recap, we've looked at language in very specific situations. And there are many specific situations that you come across daily at work. And when you can understand the language and know what to say, the next step is, okay, I know what to say, I have the language, I can express myself, but I'm not really confident to do that. Maybe you know what to say in these situations. Like, okay, I know that I should say, could you, would you, can you? I know how to ask for these requests, but maybe you're not as confident in articulating yourself and expressing yourself. And that's when you want to develop your fluency and the different aspects of refining, maybe to sound more professional, to sound more confident. Once you, the next step, the next level, and might take some while to get there, is you want to then to work in an international environment, not just to feel like, okay, I can do this, but I feel really confident in my job. I'm able to go to work and I defend my decisions. I present my ideas and my managers are really impressed with what I'm doing, or my team really value my input. You then want to do that, you really want to advance more higher level communication strategies. And that is being able to develop the insight of being able to navigate more diverse situations at work and developing the skills that are very specific to that. So for example, one is understanding the cultural differences, but it could also be developing the very specific skills, for example, for an interview. It could also be developing the very specific skills to negotiate your decisions and to negotiate. It can also be the very specific situation of presenting, how to pitch and present your ideas. So there are steps, and you're thinking, okay, that sounds really complicated. If you're just starting, the first thing is, like I said, to build your vocabulary, build your language, and really build that foundation. When you're confident with that, once you develop that, you can then continue to the next step. But that's the first step. And hopefully today the examples I've shared have been helpful. If you do want extra help, feel free to send me a message if you have any questions. I love hearing from you. But I'm going to close here. But let me know if you have any questions, if you're watching the replay. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you all soon. Bye.